In the early hours of Christmas Eve 2015, a young teacher named Katie Lockyear walked into a hotel room with someone she believed she could trust. By morning, her family would be desperately searching for her, and by afternoon, the unthinkable would be confirmed. This is the story of a life stolen by deception, a system that failed to protect, and a family left to pick up the pieces of a tragedy that should never have happened. December 2015 was meant to be a time of celebration and rest. Schools across the United Kingdom were closing their doors for the holiday break. Offices were slowing down, and families were preparing for Christmas gatherings. For teachers like Katie Lockyear, the approaching holiday offered something precious, a chance to step away from the relentless pace of lesson planning, grading, and classroom management. At just 23 years old, Katie was living with her parents in Buckhurst Hill, Essex, the youngest of 3 daughters in a close-knit family. She taught history and politics at Cardinal Pole Catholic School in Hackney, East London, where she was known for her energy, her dedication, and her genuine care for her students. Those who knew Katie described her as radiant and full of life. Even as a young child, she had a helper's heart. Her father remembered the day she came home from nursery and explained that she hadn't gone out to play because she was too busy helping the other children put their shoes on. That selflessness stayed with her as she grew. As a teenager, she was outgoing and confident, someone who made friends easily and approached life with enthusiasm. She loved being part of something bigger than herself, whether that was the Brownies, the Girl Guides, or a sports team. Water sports became one of her passions, and she trained to become a kayak instructor, spending countless hours on the water teaching others. She studied history and politics at Southampton University, volunteered at the 2012 London Olympics, and travelled to the United States to work with underprivileged children. Katie was the kind of person who set goals and achieved them, who gave back to her community, and who made everyone around her feel valued. Like many young people in 2015, Katie had turned to online dating as a way to meet new people. Her schedule was demanding, and meeting someone organically wasn't always easy. So she joined Plenty of Fish, a popular dating platform, and began connecting with others. In early December, she matched with a man named Carl Langdell. Their conversations seemed promising. He appeared intelligent, accomplished, and kind. His online profile painted the picture of a driven young professional, someone who had graduated from law school, founded his own legal firm, and even maintained a blog focused on humanitarian issues. On paper, he seemed like someone worth meeting. Katie was cautious, as most people are when meeting someone from the internet. She shared his photo with her friends, told them where she would be, and kept them updated as the evening unfolded. She knew that online personas don't always match reality, but nothing about Carl's messages raised any red flags. So, on the 23rd of December, Katie agreed to meet him in person. They planned to have drinks at a bar in Shoreditch, a lively area in East London. Katie texted her friends during the date, letting them know things were going well. But as the night wore on, Carl began drinking heavily. He became visibly intoxicated, unsteady on his feet, and eventually violently ill. Concerned for his well-being, Katie made the decision to help him get back to his hotel rather than leave him alone in that condition. She paid £65 for a taxi and an additional £80 for a clean-up fee after he was sick in the vehicle. They arrived at Theobald's Park Hotel in Hertfordshire just after 3:30 in the morning on Christmas Eve. The receptionist later recalled watching Katie support Carl as they walked down the corridor because he was so unsteady he could barely stand. What Katie didn't know, what she had no way of knowing, was that the man she was helping had a history of violence, threats, and dark fantasies. Just weeks earlier, Carl Langdell had been sentenced for threatening to kill 2 women. He had confessed to a psychiatric nurse that he experienced sexual pleasure from thoughts of murder, thoughts he'd been having since he was 16 years old. He had been assessed by doctors as a high risk to women, yet none of that information had been shared in a way that could protect the public. And now, in the quiet hours before Christmas, Katie Lockyear was alone with him. Katie Lockyear was born into a family that valued kindness, hard work, and connection. Her parents, William and Jennifer, raised 3 daughters, and Katie was the youngest. From an early age, it was clear she had a generous spirit. While other children were focused on playtime, Katie was thinking about how she could help those around her. That trait never left her. As she grew older, she became the kind of friend people could rely on, the kind of teacher students remembered long after they left her classroom. When it came time for university, Katie chose to study history and politics at Southampton University. She was drawn to understanding how societies functioned, how power was distributed, and how individuals could make a difference in their communities. She wasn't content to simply learn in a classroom. She wanted to apply that knowledge in the real world. In 2012, she volunteered at the London Olympics, an experience that allowed her to be part of a global event and contribute to something larger than herself. She also traveled to the United States to work with underprivileged children, spending time in communities where resources were scarce and needs were great. Those who worked alongside her remembered her warmth, her patience, and her ability to connect with young people who had every reason to be guarded. Carl Langdell was not who he claimed to be. The law degree, the legal firm, the internship, none of it was real. He had fabricated his entire online persona, creating a version of himself that would be attractive to someone like Katie. And it worked. The hours that followed Katie and Carl's arrival at Theobald's Park Hotel remain the darkest part of this story. At 4 a.m, Katie called down to the front desk to request 2 toothbrushes. It was a small, ordinary request. The kind of thing anyone might ask for after an unexpected overnight stay. But it would be the last time anyone heard from her. What happened in that hotel room over the next few hours is almost unbearable to consider, but it's important to understand the reality of what Katie faced. Not for the sake of sensationalism, but because her story matters, and because the system's failure to protect her must be acknowledged. Carl Langdell strangled Katie to death. The attack was not quick or accidental. It was prolonged and forceful, involving sustained pressure on her neck until she stopped breathing. The pathologist who later examined her body described the assault as violent and deliberate. Katie had injuries consistent with blows to her body, marks that suggested she had been struck or had come into contact with hard surfaces during the attack. There was no ambiguity about what had happened. This was not a tragic accident or a situation that spiraled out of control. This was murder. But Carl's depravity did not end with Katie's death. After killing her, he sexually assaulted her body. He took photographs of her remains on his phone, images he would later attempt to delete, but which investigators would recover. These actions reveal something deeply disturbing about Carl's state of mind. This wasn't a crime of passion or a moment of lost control. It was calculated, deliberate, and rooted in fantasies he had harbored for years. He had once confessed to a psychiatric nurse that he experienced sexual gratification from thoughts of killing people, that these thoughts had been with him since he was 16, and that they were becoming more intense. Now, Those thoughts had become reality. After committing these acts, Carl took steps to conceal what he had done. He called the hotel reception to request a late checkout, giving himself more time before anyone would enter the room. He placed a "Do Not Disturb" sign on the door. He wrapped Katie's body in a quilt from the bed, placed her in a laundry cart, and wheeled her out of the hotel. Another guest later recalled seeing a coat hanger wedged into the fire escape door on that floor, something that seemed odd and out of place. Carl disposed of Katie's body in the undergrowth, near a skip on the hotel grounds, leaving her there as if she were nothing more than discarded waste. Then he returned to his room, went to sleep, woke up, had breakfast, and checked out of the hotel as if nothing had happened. When hotel staff later entered the room, they found that all the bedding and towels were missing. The window lock had been broken. It was clear something unusual had occurred, but by then, Carl was already gone. He went home to his parents' house, walking the family dog as if it were just another ordinary day. But Katie's family and friends were already beginning to panic. She had been supposed to house sit for a friend that morning, but she never arrived. Her phone was ringing, but no one was answering. When someone finally did pick up, it wasn't Katie. Instead, a man was heard making long, drawn-out breaths and whispering her name. The person on the other end was Carl. Katie's friends immediately began trying to find her. They searched through social media, found Carl's profile, and sent him messages on Facebook asking where she was. He responded with confusion, claiming that Katie had left in a taxi hours ago and that he had no idea where she had gone. He said her phone battery had died before she left, that he had tried calling her, and that he assumed she was home by now. He ended his messages with, "Keep me updated," as if he were genuinely concerned. But he wasn't concerned. He knew exactly where Katie was because he had put her there. Katie's father, desperate for answers, managed to track down Carl's family home in Cheshunt. He drove there hoping to find some clue about his daughter's whereabouts. When he arrived, Carl's mother greeted him and explained that Carl was out walking the dog. She called her son to ask about Katie, and it was then, over the phone, that Carl finally spoke the truth. He told his mother, "I am a monster. I put her in the ground." His mother, understandably horrified, relayed this to Katie's father, who immediately called the police. Officers responded quickly and arrested Carl at Lee Valley Park. He confessed to where he had left Katie's body, and investigators moved immediately to the hotel grounds. It was there, hidden in the undergrowth near a skip, that they found Katie Lockyear. The moment Katie's body was discovered, the investigation shifted from a missing person case to a murder inquiry. Detectives worked methodically to piece together what had happened, but Carl was not making their job easy. After his initial confession about where he had left Katie's body, he largely refused to cooperate. When investigators brought him in for questioning on Christmas Day, he sat in silence, refusing to answer questions or provide any further details. It was a calculated move, one that forced detectives to rely on physical evidence, witness statements, and the fragments of information Carl had already let slip. Toxicology tests revealed that Carl had multiple substances in his system at the time of the murder, including alcohol, cocaine, diazepam, and antidepressants. His phone, which had been seized during his arrest, contained deleted photographs of Katie's body. Forensic analysts were able to recover these images, providing undeniable proof of what Carl had done after her death. The pathologist's report confirmed that Katie had been strangled, and that the injuries on her body were consistent with a violent, prolonged assault. There was no evidence to support any claim of consensual activity. This was, unquestionably, a brutal murder followed by sexual assault. But as investigators dug deeper into Carl Langdell's background, they uncovered something even more disturbing. This was not a man who had suddenly snapped or acted out of character. Carl had a long, well-documented history of violent threats, disturbing fantasies, and dangerous behavior. And yet, he had been allowed to remain in the community, free to contact women through dating apps, free to meet someone like Katie. The question that haunted everyone involved was simple. How had this been allowed to happen? Carl Langdell had been known to law enforcement and mental health services for years. In 2009, he had been cautioned for assaulting a girlfriend. In 2013, he was deemed a risk to himself and made unsubstantiated claims that someone was threatening to harm him. But it was in 2015 that his behavior became truly alarming. In March of that year, while living in Bristol with his girlfriend's family, he contacted a psychiatric nurse and made a chilling confession. He told the nurse that he wanted to cut the throat of his girlfriend's sister, remove her clothing, view her naked, and sexually assault her dead body. The nurse took the threat seriously and reported it to police. When Carl learned that his comments had been passed on to authorities, he called the psychiatric team again and threatened to slit the nurse's throat. He then contacted police directly and threatened to kill someone. Carl was arrested and detained under the Mental Health Act. During his assessment, he told the examining doctor that he experienced sexual gratification from thoughts of killing people, that he had been having these thoughts since he was 16, and that they were becoming increasingly intense. The doctor assessed him as presenting a high risk to others, particularly women, and noted that Carl had full capacity to understand his own statements. This was not someone experiencing delusions or a break from reality. This was someone who understood exactly what he was saying and what it meant. But despite this assessment, the information was not widely shared. It remained in Carl's medical file, seen by only a handful of people, and was never communicated to agencies in Hertfordshire, where Carl would later be living. In April 2015, Carl pleaded guilty at Bristol Crown Court to making threats to kill his girlfriend's sister. He was granted bail with conditions, including wearing an electronic tag and residing at his parents' home in Hertfordshire. But here's where the system began to fail. The police force in Bristol did not notify Hertfordshire police that Carl had been bailed to their area. Mental health services in Hertfordshire were not informed of the detailed psychiatric assessment that had taken place in Bristol. Nobody seemed to be talking to anybody else. Carl continued to exhibit dangerous behavior. He made threats against his then-girlfriend's brother, but these were dismissed as non-criminal domestic incidents. He was admitted to a psychiatric hospital in August 2015 after making another suicide attempt. While there, staff documented his threatening behavior toward women and moved him to an all-male ward to protect vulnerable female patients. On September 17th, he shouted at a staff nurse, "When I leave, or I am discharged, I will kill someone. Document that. I will kill someone when I leave. You must document that." Hospital staff did report this to Hertfordshire police, but it was not formally recorded as a crime. 3 days later, he was discharged from the psychiatric hospital. On December 2nd, just weeks before he would meet Katie, Carl was sentenced for his earlier threats to kill. He received a 9-month prison sentence, suspended for 2 years, along with a mental health treatment requirement. But none of the agencies involved in his case had a complete picture of who he was or what he was capable of. His probation officer did not perceive him as a risk. His doctor was unaware of the full extent of his violent fantasies. And Katie, the woman who would soon meet him on a dating app, had no idea any of this had happened. At the time of Katie's murder, Carl was in contact with up to 20 women through dating websites. He had taken at least one other woman to the same hotel where he killed Katie. He was a predator actively hunting for victims, and the system designed to protect the public had failed to stop him. On Christmas Day, 2015, Carl Langdell was charged with the murder of Katie Lockyear. He was remanded in custody, and in the months that followed, he would eventually plead guilty. But even after his arrest, his violent behavior continued. In May 2016, while being held at HMP Bedford, Carl launched a brutal 4-minute attack on a prison officer who had refused to unlock a cell so he could smoke. The officer suffered a smashed eye socket, was nearly strangled, and endured lasting psychological trauma. Carl was later convicted of causing actual bodily harm. It would take 8 years for the officer to receive compensation for that attack. In June 2016, Carl appeared for sentencing at St Albans Crown Court. The prosecutor, Anne Evans, laid out the horrifying details of what Carl had done. She explained that after strangling Katie to death, he had sexually assaulted her body and taken photographs of her remains. She told the court that Carl had wrapped Katie in a quilt, placed her in a laundry cart, and dumped her near a skip as if she were nothing. Judge Andrew Bright listened to the evidence, heard from Katie's devastated family, and delivered a sentence that reflected the gravity of Carl's crimes. He sentenced Carl to life in prison with a minimum term of 26 years before he could even be considered for parole. The judge made it clear that Carl posed a very great danger to women and young girls, and that his release, if it ever happened, would depend on psychiatric assessments confirming he was no longer a threat. Katie's mother, Jennifer, gave a victim impact statement in court. She spoke about the impossibility of preparing to meet a monster, about the hole left in their lives, about missing her daughter every single minute of every day. Katie's father looked directly at Carl and said, "On the internet, you said you were an ordinary, decent person. You are ordinary, but you are not a decent person." Carl sat in the dock and sobbed as the judge delivered his sentence. In a letter read to the court, Carl acknowledged that no apology, no sentence, not even his own death, could make up for what he had done. But those words offered little comfort to the family who would never see Katie again. After sentencing, an inquest was held to examine how Carl had been managed in the months and years leading up to Katie's murder. The assistant coroner, Alison McCormack, conducted a thorough review and found that multiple agencies had missed opportunities to share information about Carl. She noted that there had been minimal communication between the organizations managing him and no coordinated approach to assessing or mitigating his risk. None of the agencies involved knew the full story. None of them knew what the others knew. The coroner concluded that, although mental health services had identified the need to protect female patients and staff from Carl, this concern was never extended to protecting women in the wider community after his release. No agency had considered referring him to a procedure designed to manage potentially dangerous individuals in the community. It was a catastrophic failure of communication, coordination, and accountability. An independent review commissioned by NHS England found systemic missed opportunities and a lack of information sharing. However, the review also concluded that it was impossible to predict with certainty whether Carl would act on his threats. They noted that the vast majority of people who make threats never follow through, and distinguishing between those who will and those who won't is extraordinarily difficult. The review stated that Katie's tragic death could not have been predicted with the degree of certainty that would have made it possible to prevent. But that conclusion offered little solace to Katie's family or to anyone who understood just how many warning signs had been ignored. Carl Langdell remained in prison for the next several years. His mental health continued to deteriorate. He was transferred between facilities, including a stint at Rampton High Security Hospital, where psychiatrists eventually determined that he had fabricated delusional symptoms and was not suffering from a psychotic illness. In May 2019, he was discharged from Rampton and moved to HMP Bedford. Days later, he attempted to take his own life, causing a severe injury to his neck. He was later transferred to HMP Wakefield, a facility often referred to as Monster Mansion due to the nature of the offenders housed there. By early 2021, Carl had stopped taking psychiatric medication, refused to engage with mental health teams, and withdrew from contact with other prisoners. The coroner later described him as a young man immensely isolated. His behavior became increasingly erratic and hostile. On February 11th, 2021, at the age of 31, Carl Langdell was found in his cell at HMP Wakefield with severe self-inflicted injuries to his neck. Despite efforts by officers, nurses, and paramedics, he was pronounced dead shortly after midnight. Katie Lockyear's story is one of heartbreak, loss. She was a young woman full of promise, someone who dedicated her life to helping others, who approached the world with kindness and trust, and who deserved so much more than the fate she received. Her death was not inevitable. It was the result of a man who harbored violent fantasies and a system that failed to recognize the danger he posed.